All right. And we are live now with Business Acceleration Playbook, giving you the plays you need to help your business win. Cue Jeff laughing at Maria. So he laughs at me every time I say that. But you know what? I am sticking with it. I like it. I think it's just quirky enough to be fun. So it's fine. All right. So I'm Maria Daniels. We have Angela Buckley, Jeff Dwoskin. Ray Baxter hasn't joined us. I don't know if he's going to be able to make it today or not. But we do have our special guest, Tim Croll, with us today. So you can say hi to him.
Hi,
So
Tim.
Angela,
Welcome.
Angela, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then Jeff, go ahead and say your hellos, and then we'll go ahead and dive into the world. Oh, Tim.
Great. So my name's Angela Buckley, and I work with Creatively Efficient, and I write a leadership series called Strength in Nature. I like to draw our lessons and analogies from plants, hiking, outdoors, trying to really draw that in. And my expertise is really in organizational leadership. I've been a change leader for 25 years in the manufacturing industry. So welcome. I'm excited to hear you today, Tim.
I think we're going to connect on multiple levels. I'm
Excellent.
like,
I knew you all would. I knew it.
Speaking to my heart here, we've got a backpacking trip where we're going 5 days out in the wilderness. I've got 20 people that can go with me. Currently, it's filled up to 11. So there's still a slot if you want to go backpacking up along Lake Superior. Absolutely beautiful. So
when?
Second week of August.
Oh, it's race season. We'll see.
It's there. But
it's
yeah,
beautiful.
It's incredible. Yeah, I got pictures. Someday I'll share pictures with you because it's unbelievable.
Okay, excellent. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, Jeff, cue you.
Cue me. Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Dwoskin. I didn't realize I giggled at your intro, Maria, but I was actually giggling.
You
when
do
you called
every
me out
time.
on it, and
I know, because you do it every time. I notice
Every
these
time.
things. You've made me self-conscious on it, but I do it.
It's actually because I really like it. I like. I do. I like.
That is it.
It's a clever intro, and so it just that's my natural reaction. Anytime
you giggle
every time.
I giggle.
Okay.
I'm a giggler.
Right.
Anyway, Jeff Dwoskin, founder of #Stampede. We help brands engage with fans and customers online in a unique way to help drive them from anonymous to non-anonymous. Like, you need to come up with a better word for that.
It's double negative, so we're positive.
Known.
Right. So
Known.
you can get them into your CRM system and market to them outside of social media. So
awesome. All right. And Tim, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Tim Croll. I work with business growth strategies. Most people look at that and say, what the heck is that? So the easiest way for me to explain that is I basically run diagnostics on businesses. And by running those diagnostics, I kind of figure out where you're leaking oil or if the gas is getting to the machine, like what's going on with your business, and then we plug those leaks. So that's the easiest way for me to explain that. But I love working at the strategy level and then coming up with a plan to say, okay, this is how we can move forward. This is the action steps that we can implement to have more whatever that is you're looking for.
Absolutely. And I love Tim. Me and Tim have decided that we're like pretty much the same person. So we talk all the time. And we're doing
differences there, just in case you couldn't recognize.
Just a few, but I mean, overall, we're a lot alike. We've had enough conversations. We're like, wow, okay, we think a lot alike. So Angela and Jeff are probably terrified now, but it is what it is. But yeah, I mean, Tim, I really excited to have you on because obviously we've had lots of chats and done, some different things together. And I love your outlook on things. And I love the way that you see things, not only because I just said we're a lot alike, because I actually just like it, but I like the way you teach on leadership too. And today, I know that was one of the things you were going to be talking on the leadership flywheel and all of that. And I'm just going to go ahead and let you dive in. And then the way we typically do that is we just ask questions as we go. But I know you're like me, you like to talk, so you'll probably do fine. So.
But I like the questions and I like the interaction because it creates more of a reality of how people are receiving information. So I love that component of it. I am traveling, so this is not my normal setup. I'm getting confused on where my camera is. So if I'm not looking at you, it's because I forgot where my camera was.
I was wondering if you're in a hotel room.
I'm traveling, so it's kind of one of those things. It's like I love coming, and that's what makes our world so awesome right now is we can do our work and teach and be in places that we wouldn't normally be, but because of this beautiful internet connection, we get to share, and we get to have impact when we wouldn't normally have impact, right? When we're being locked down. So the first thing that I do when I start teaching and talking about leadership is it's truly amazing to me how there is nothing new under the sun, and how we have had 2,000 years plus of leadership training, and then somebody comes along and says, oh, I've got this brand new thing. I'm like, dude, you don't have a brand new thing. It's like, you don't. It's just, we've got years, centuries of time here where people have been teaching about leadership. And so what I like to do is put it into framework. So when I look at leadership, what is that framework component that's going to allow us to take all of the massive amount of knowledge and data and information that is available, put it into a framework so now we can actually apply it, use it, and then have success based on what that knowledge is. Because the main thing is we can have tons of knowledge but zero wisdom, because all of that knowledge doesn't get translated in that. Wisdom is that practical application of knowledge. And so that's where I like to use the leadership flywheel. And then I do use the word flywheel on purpose, because as you start to generate momentum, it creates more momentum, and you're constantly putting energy into this, and it's just moving faster and faster, getting you either up the hill or further along on your journey. And so that's the framework that I like to use. Again, keeping in mind, frankly, inside of the leadership growth flywheel, there's really nothing new. It's just taking those pieces, putting it in an outline form so that we can apply those to our businesses, apply those to our personal lives. So that's the general premise of which I work. So in the flywheel outline itself, there's two ways to apply this. First of all, we apply it internally. How does this work on our own lives? Second is, how do we apply it externally? In other words, how do we teach people how to go through this? How do we apply it to our either employees? Sometimes it's our families, sometimes it's community, nonprofit. How do we apply this externally? So it's internal and external. And then the last piece of the foundation for the flywheel is this, and this is absolutely critical. There's a considerable difference between a good leader and a great leader. And the one key element that makes the difference between a good leader and a great leader is that a great leader uses their wealth or finances, their influence, they use their power, all of the things that they have at their disposal, they use that for the benefit of others. A good leader uses all of those same things, wealth, power, influence, for their own consumption. And in today's world, we are seeing a massive, I would say the majority of the leaders that I see in the world are good leaders, not great leaders. Because they're using their power, their finances, their influence for consumption to make their lives better. And when you accept that mantle of leadership, you need to understand that you're accepting something on behalf of others, and you need to use that power that you're being granted in the benefit of those that are going to be helped. And if you cannot make that difference, you will be doomed to just be a good leader. You will never make it into the greatness that you could become. So that's my foundation. That's my introduction. So
oh, I love it. I love it.
So in this leadership aspect, I have 5 phases that I work in. And I'm going to just do a flyby, and then we can dig in and we can go whichever direction you want, because there's all kinds of applications that this is going to work in. And I've never seen an end to it, just to be honest with you, right? So the 5 phases are this. First of all, you need to learn how to lead yourself. If you can't understand and learn how to lead yourself, then you're never going to make it into the next phase. The next phase is leading as a manager. The key in that phase is you manage things, not people. So many times we get that confused. We start to manage people instead of managing the things that we have available. So managing things are going to be specific in items, consumables, and we can go in all kinds of different illustrations, but you want to learn how to manage things. Third one is being a leader of followers. No matter who you are, where you are, whether you have one person following you or 100,000 people following you, you need to learn how to be able to be a great leader of followers. And underneath of that, there's 5 powers of influence we can talk about and dig into some of that. There's really only 5 ways to influence people. The separation, again, between a good leader and a great leader. A good leader will manipulate with those powers. A great leader will influence with those powers. So you can use it for the good and the bad. The fourth is learning to lead leaders. And this is where coaching comes into play. And you're actually starting to teach people, walk with them on their journey of leadership to go back into those 3 phases, learn more about themselves, learn more about managing things, learn more about leading followers. But that's the leader of leaders. And then the last phase, this is actually my favorite one because it's the most misunderstood, but it's leading as a mentor. A mentor is what most people consider a mentor as the guy that's got his head shaved, he's sitting on the top of the mountain, his arms are outstretched, cross-legged, and he's this sage, this Buddha type sage, and you go up, you climb the mountain just to ask that one question. What is your one question? And then you get that answer, right? That's what we try to work for. But truly, leading as a mentor means that you're leading out of your experiences. You're leading them out of an experience that you have had in the past and being able to lead them into the future. So it's leading out of experiences. So that
sounds like empathy.
It does. And that's a great word. And I love that part of it because there's 2 ways to lead with empathy. You have empathy and sympathy. Empathy means that you're actually leading because you've walked through that. But don't underestimate sympathy, because sympathy means that you can relate to their feelings that they're having, but you may not be able to relate exactly to their experience. And a great example is, obviously, I'm a dad. So as I teach my kids, I will never have empathy for a mom because I never went through that experience. I'm not a mom. But I can have sympathy because I know the frustrations, because I'm a dad. I know that emotion of fear or of being let down or of pain or hope that they're going to do better, right? So there's that big difference between the empathy and the sympathy. So where do you want me to go? We can dive into any one of these parts, and I know we're doing this live, so I'm sure there's maybe questions as we continue on. But we can dig
Jeff
into.
had one. I
did, and I'm like, why is Tim ignoring me? And then I realized I was on mute.
It helps to have the mic on.
Yeah.
Well, it was like all of a sudden there was they're doing some construction or something in my house.
So Tim, Jeff didn't tell you that he's a comedian.
Uh-oh.
So, he's really just trying to get you to laugh.
I got Tim excited today.
I
friended him on
that
Facebook,
won't
and he's
be a
like,
problem.
"How can I help you?" And I'm like, "Oh, we're just doing this thing later." So, couple things. One is I apologize for whatever this thing on my nose is.
I can't even see it.
Well, I can see it.
Man.
It's like
this is me. My hair. See, it's like,
woo! I don't know if I should do this or this.
No, we didn't even notice. You're the one pointed it out. Now I'm looking extra hard.
Now you can't not see it. Okay, here's my question. Or here's my. It would seem to me that the good leaders think they're great leaders. So how do you somebody either below them, or how do they break through that? Because they're probably not self-aware.
Well, at that point, it goes to, I think Maxwell said this, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And so there's a whole ton of ego type things that come into play. And until they're completely disgusted with who they are, where they're at, they're never going to change. That's just a fact of life. And so I want to work with individuals and people, and this is where I really try to focus is you have a pain point. There's something that you are disgusted with. That's what starts that process of change. But if you're not disgusted with the way that you are, you're never going to change that individual who thinks that they're a great leader. It's just not going to happen.
Well, but if I'm a good leader, that's still a positive label, good, right?
You're like, it's good enough.
Well, it's sounding like you're using good and great as great and bad, and it's a good. Are there levels of good,
right?
Because
I didn't take it like that.
No,
I took it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, I don't know, but I took it as a good leader may be good at running his company, bringing in profits, going through all the steps for the company, but he hasn't extended it out to start to think about the bigger picture, the bigger why, like giving back, pay it forward type of thing. So I think that there is kind of like a crossover moment where, yes, profits are great. Running a great company is great, but there has to be more than that.
I feel like when you, sorry.
No, go ahead.
That's what I took as the bad part, because it sounds like if you're working for somebody who's selfish, which is, I think, how it sounded like good was that's one of the main differences. Then that can't be a great place to work. I mean, unless you literally just go for your paycheck and go home and don't care.
But
you know,
maybe if you look at it from the perspective of, hey, I'm a good leader, or I'm a servant leader, where I'm really looking to grow the people in addition to the business, right? Like, obviously, as a leader and a business leader, you need to be able to grow the business part, but you also need to be able to grow and develop your people. If you don't have followers, you're then not really leading, you're just managing. So that transition from, I can get my people to do what needs to be done, to my people know what to do without me, right? Like, I think that's your that beginning step between good and great. I personally want to be able to not come to work and still know that I can trust my team to get the work done that needs to be done.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like when you start saying, I didn't come to work to tell you what to do and micromanage. I came to work because I want to grow and I want you to grow, so that when I'm not here, you're able to fill that role. Like, I think maybe I don't know. Is that what you're trying to say? That's kind of how I hear it, Tim.
Yeah, you guys are all pretty much right on track. Where I come at it from, the difference between the good and the great. Our society defines good, a good leader, somebody that can accomplish something. Unfortunately, our society also takes out morality. And so when we look at it from a perspective of, is somebody a good leader, that means that they have results. They were able to accomplish something. Doesn't matter what that thing was, whether it was a good or a bad thing. It just means that they were able to accomplish something. So to define the difference between somebody that's good and somebody that's great is we add this element of morality. And again, it comes down to the fact of, we are using all of the tools, all of the benefits, all of the influence that we have for the benefit of others. Now, frankly, we could actually dig back into history and look at a lot of different, and I'm going to use two from history. One, and if I'm glitching a little bit, Maria, just tell me, because I don't know.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay, so one, we would consider Hitler to be a good leader. In that aspect, he was able to influence an entire nation and a group of individuals to do some very bad things. So he was good at what he did because he was able to accomplish something. On the other hand, we have somebody like Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin created the post office. He created libraries. He created, with all of his power and influence, that he could have just sat back on his heels after he retired from the printing industry. He could have just sat back and not done anything, but yet he chose to use his power, influence, and finances for the greater good of the community. So I would consider Benjamin Franklin to be a great leader because he used all of what he had for the benefit of others to accomplish things that were going to benefit others. And so that's how I would define the difference between good and great. You can find good leaders all across our nation, in companies, in all different areas. But then I sit back and I look at, what did their company actually accomplish? Yeah, they made money. Yeah, they produced a lot of stuff. Yeah, they did a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, did they really leave a deep, lasting impact on our world? Did they change people's lives for the better? So let's go back to the original question, Jeff, when you said when people aren't aware. And that's where the very first part of this flywheel is, are you working on your own personal development? And as you break down the personal development, I have 4 core areas that you should continue to grow in your own self. It's physical, mental, spiritual, and social. And as you grow in those 4 areas, you can apply any one of a number of different tactics or goals or anything along those lines when it comes to self-development. But if you don't realize and start working on your own personal life, you're never going to have a greater influence when it comes to followers. You won't be able to coach those leader of leaders. You won't be able to have that influence. And then as you work into the mentor phase, if you're not developing yourself, how are you going to learn from those experiences? And my own life, I've had situations that I call it the school of hard knocks, right? Where I've been sued multiple times because of business, failed partnerships, whatever it ends up being. I've had a lot of situations that have happened, and I have 2 choices. I can either stay and live in the pain and the hurt and the anger, or I choose to learn from that, adjust, and become a better person, which then gives me more influence for the followers, a better coach as a leader of leaders, and then more experiences as a mentor.
Right. It's my earlier point about the 2 categories. I mean, to your example, it's hard to sit there and categorize Hitler as a good leader because he was able to do something bad. So I don't know that would make him a good leader for successfully convincing people to do what he did. So, there's got to be a kind of a
Well, let me pause on one point on that, because this one, I hate our English language so much, because we use words and everybody has a different definition of that word. So I get exactly where you're coming from, because if you define good as something that's positive, great, that's one definition. But then we can also look at it as a good. So I get it, totally understand where you're coming from on that. But that's one thing I hate about our English language.
Take it away.
So, well, I think maybe what he was possibly trying to say with that is that the things that Hitler did obviously was horrible and terrible, but he was able to do things effectively, even though they were terrible and horrible. If he would have kind of switched some of those things out with positive, morally upstanding things, it would have been good. But yeah, I mean, I think that's what I was thinking you were saying anyway.
Yeah.
Not to put words in your mouth.
No. But I would say the same thing. He was good at his job. He was good at what he was trying to accomplish.
And he was good at bad things.
Moved away from the Nazi Hitler.
Maybe he was efficient or effective, but not necessarily
I use the word
good.
efficient and Hitler.
Is that okay?
That's totally fine.
Just move on.
Okay.
No more Hitler. Thank you. Okay.
Totally fine. So when we're looking at the differences, then as we go through those phases, when we deal with our personal development, you've got to learn how to be able to build your own life in those 4 phases. Then you look at the management and the phases of those. It really comes down to, how do you create and time block? What are you doing to be able to build your time, be able to set portions aside inside of your week? What are you doing with your finances? What are you doing with there's so many different components when it comes to managing things. And that's where you have to learn how to develop as a manager to be able to manage that. And then that again goes back into the influence and the influencing of the leader of the followers. So again, we can dive into each one of these components and see how that goes. But I don't know which direction you guys want to go. I love the questions and the pieces and the parts of that, but let me know which way to go on each one of these things.
Angela, I think you should have some questions, since you are like Miss Leadership. I think it would be great to kind of to see what questions you have on the leadership angle.
So, hot topic at the moment right now, a lot of people are feeling very overwhelmed. They're struggling to sort of dig out from under 2020, but somehow 2021 just hasn't been as positive yet as we were all kind of hoping, like slow rollout on vaccines. One of the topics that a lot of leadership friends, I don't know, whatever, our colleagues have been talking about recently has been, how are we helping people dig out from under and cope with some of the stresses and some of the day-to-days? Where do you go with that? So I certainly have the techniques that I've been coaching with people, but I'd love to hear what you're doing as well.
I guess the first thing would be to define what that individual is doing, because there's differences on how people structure their own lives, and there's differences as far as the maturity of where they're at mentally, right? So we have some individuals that have never really become self-aware, and they've put themselves in a position where they are they blame everybody else for the position that they're currently in. Right. If we go back to Jim Rohn, I love Jim Rohn. I love where he's at and what he's been doing. But Jim Rohn says this: the weather is going to blow on everybody. The storms are going to happen to everybody. But it's learning how to set your sails to take advantage of whatever that weather is, whichever way the winds are blowing. Because quite frankly, at the end of the day, we don't have control over the vaccines. We don't have control over the politics. We don't have control. There's a lot of things that we don't have control over, which then leads us to a lot of frustration. But if we can now take that step back and say, okay, what are the things that I do have control over? What are the things that I have the ability to allow to influence my own life? I mean, the biggest thing right now is social media. The social media is telling us how to think, where to go, what to do, all of those things that are happening, but yet we consume and consume and consume, and we take on all of those emotions. Burdens. We take all of that on, but we don't have a safe place where we can go and unload and then come back to the center of where our soul is at. that time of reflection, the time of quiet. And everybody's going to define that the soul differently depending on where you're coming from, how you were raised. But there's a certain element of this reflective centering that you have to come back into, whether it's meditation, whether some people use music, some people use quiet time, some people use prayer. Everybody has to come back to the center. So whether you are leading a CEO company of a Fortune 500 company, or you're a janitor in a high school, all of this data and information keeps pounding in on us. And then we have to come back and say, okay, where's my center? Where is who I am and how I value my own life? Where am I going to find that from? Because if we allow the society, any of the social media, if we allow them to tell us who we are, then we're forever dominated by whatever that loudest megaphone is going to be. I don't know if that answered your question directly, but it's a matter of finding your center. It's a matter of coming back and saying, okay, this is my habit and my routine of how to become better, stronger, and not allow the impact of the world to have such a devastating effect on me. Because there's always going to be challenges. Everybody's going to go through challenges.
No, I absolutely agree.
So we've been talking about kind of a three-way approach where you talk about the physical aspects of it. So you had said you had 4 earlier.
Yep.
I blended mindset and spirituality into one.
Right.
And so you have your physical, and you have your mindset, spirituality as another, and then kind of your do, right? Like, where are you going to be with that? And if you can find that getting away. So in German, we have this word, your Alltag, the things that you're doing every day, those day-to-day little miniature things that just, you have to do them in order to keep going. But how can you make that, almost turn that into a ritual instead of a hectic?
Absolutely.
Right? Like, you have to sweep the floor. Is it something that's going to be hectic, or could you use this as a moment of reflection as you sweep the floor, right? Like if you've got kids or dogs or something, right, there's these things. I have to walk the dog. That's because I get up at 4 or 5 in the morning and I'm the first one up. So the dog says, good, you're my best friend. But it could either be, I have to walk the dog, or it could be, I'm going to enjoy that the stars are out this morning and the owl just flew by, and I'm going to take, like, it's the same thing. I'm walking outside, but can I take it to a moment of peace as opposed to a moment of hectic? Finding that, to find your center in the everyday.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. Your attitude is going to affect how you approach any daily chore that you're going to have. And I couldn't agree more with that aspect, is finding the good inside of whatever those daily routines are. That is absolute key. The one I would say, if you want to take it one step further in the details of what you're doing, is it's an understanding of what activities drain and what activities drive you. So one of the challenges and one of the things that I use as far as in the workshop is to be able to actually take a look at and say, okay, every day you list out and you say, on this component, what I want you to do is be able to list all of the things that you found energy, all of the things that you were able to grow your own internal, whether it's your physical center or whatever. What are the things that you got up in the morning to say, yes, I'm excited about doing this. I'm really excited about doing this. And then on the other hand, you write down all of the things that drain your energy. And it's a simple thing. I would suggest doing it for 7 to 10 days. And then as you look at that, there are going to be some things on your drainer side that you're never going to be able to get rid of. And when I was doing this, I found I hate answering emails, but I have to answer emails. But it drains me. So I'm like, okay, well, let's set that and make sure that I'm doing that either early in the morning, or I put that in a time block and I only do it for a specific amount of time. So that way I'm not allowing that drainer to hit me all the way through the entire day, completely just making me completely upset with the rest of the day. So put those in blocks. And then the other thing is making sure, no matter what, that our drivers, that list of drivers is longer than the list of drainers. So that means whether you're delegating a task, delegating out some of the things, you always make sure your drivers are greater than the list of drainers. And that's one key element that I've noticed, especially with high functioning CEOs or entrepreneurs, is that we tend to allow the demands of our days to shift all of our activities into the things that drain us. And the easiest way for me to explain this is, as you're walking down this path to success, the path to success versus the path to a nervous breakdown is separated by a razor thin line. And that razor thin line is that you're always doing drainers. You're never putting energy back into it. So again, going back to those 4 key elements, which is your physical, are you taking care of your body, eating right, sleeping right? Spiritually, are you taking care of your soul? Mentally, are you continuing to put positive information into your mind, grow your wisdom and your knowledge? And then socially, how are you interacting with people, whether it's digitally or physically? How are you interacting with everybody? So that's kind of go ahead, Jeff.
We used to look at it as the 4 quadrants. That's kind of like what you're right. You know, you got crises and emergencies, you got prevention, planning, improvement. I think is where you want to be. And you got interrupting things, and then time wasters like water cooler talk, which I enjoy that. But they, but yeah, that's kind of what you're saying. So you it's a fight against the 3 competing quadrants to what you need to focus on to actually make your day productive. Do you believe in or not believe in? Do you use or recommend like virtual assistants or anything like that? Like I've worked with people that, just felt they were above email communication, talking, anything that didn't service the one person above them. I don't mean God, I mean whoever they report to is all they cared about. The way you said sounded spiritual, wasn't meant.
I'm fine with whichever direction you want to go. I mean, because everybody has some spiritual, so it's all good.
So anyway.
So what was the core of the question, though? Because I didn't quite catch the core.
I didn't either.
The core of the question is how do you balance and fight off the interruptions, the time wasters, the time sucks, the things that don't move you forward?
Right. So so we talked about the English language. This is one of the words that comes out all the time. The way that you fight against this is discipline. And to me, growing up, discipline is a bad word. Like, discipline is all about we're being punished for something that we did, whether we knew it was right or wrong, right? But that's not really truly the good root word of discipline. The good root word of discipline is all about honing your skills, right? So honing the ability to become a master at whatever it is that you're doing, right? So as we work into the ability to discipline our time, it's how do we hone those skills to be a better manager of our time? And then how do we become a better manager of our priorities? And so as we learn that discipline, as we practice those discipline, that gives us so it really truly comes down to that very first step. How do we take that first step? Because there's always going to be those competing times, and there's always going to be that distraction. There's always going to be all kinds of stuff that's going on. But at the end of the day, it's that first step, learning how to slowly discipline yourselves, and then holding yourself accountable to somebody that you're really, that you have a good, solid relationship with, that you can say, okay, this is what I'm accomplishing, this is what I'm trying to do, and that accountability to our disciplines gives us the ability to be able to accomplish and separate out and not get us distracted. Although I still get distracted all the time, just to be totally transparent with you all. I struggle with it all the time.
I think many people do. And I think you mentioned earlier just about, being an entrepreneur or a business owner or whatever the case may be, you're wearing so many hats. And, so a lot of times, especially at the very beginning, when you're a smaller business or just starting out, it's necessary that you're wearing multiple hats, but you can get distracted and end up, kind of falling into these time wasters or these things that are kind of like sucking you dry of your energy. And, I tell people all the time, really to focus on the needle mover. So like, look at your business as a whole, because you're not going to be able to do all the things. You can't do all the things. It'd be great. If you have an endless budget, an endless amount of time, fine, do all the things. But I don't know an entrepreneur or a business owner that does have an endless budget. So look at, where's the money coming now? What's getting you the most traction, and focus on that. And I think that's, overview of what you're saying on a lot of that. And it does take discipline. To me, I know I used to have the kind of the understanding that discipline was punishment the way I grew up. but it's actually teaching.
Yeah.
Discipline is teaching, so we're teaching, and in this instance, we're teaching ourselves to, okay, well, let's focus on this. And you mentioned like bundling or I call it batching. I do utilize batching. I have self-diagnosed ADHD. And if I don't batch myself, I will get distracted with all the things that it's completely a time waster. And next thing you know, 2 hours have gone by and I have nothing done. So I have to batch myself.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%, 100%. And then it's amazing too, as we look at these things, what I have found, and this goes back into becoming the leader of leaders. What I have found is, again, this is internal and external. And I had situations where a leader of a company put in his position another production leader, and was great for about 3, 6, 7 months. And then all of a sudden something happened in regards to his communication with the employees. And next thing you know, all of the employees are saying, I'm going to go find another job. I'm going to go. And the owner of the company is like, what the heck happened here? And then as he started to dig in, again, using that framework of the self-development and so on, as you dig into that, what he found was the individual was going through a divorce or a really bad breakup, which was then having a direct impact on how he was leading followers. So his communication started to fail. The way that he was interacting with people was in ways that were just very authoritarian, very directive, very you get this done or else kind of a way. And then he had to use his coaching ability to be able to say, now, was that most effective? But then coming back to it, and this is where it's really important, is what he was able to do with diagnose with the framework is he was failing in the leader of followers because the self was a wreck. Same thing with the management. Sometimes we start to fail in our influence of others because our time management is a wreck. We haven't blocked things off, or we haven't put a schedule, or we don't have the right priorities in place. And that includes our family, right? There's no way, and so many people use this term, like, I'm going to balance my family and my business. And I personally believe that's a false narrative, and it's impossible to ever balance things perfectly. But at the end of the day, you have to have priorities and know where you need to dedicate your time. What is the demand? Is it something that's a crisis that's going on inside of your company? Or is there a health issue? Is there a death? Is there something that people need you in your family? And that's where you have to look at the management of things to be able to adjust your time based on those priorities, based on who is most important to you.
Absolutely. And I think prioritizing things can be kind of a challenge. And I like work-life balance thing is one of my pet peeves. I talk on that all the time. Just about, because it's like, I mean, I remember chasing that idea of work-life balance, and it's just that is a false narrative, like you said. So I do have a question. When you mentioned just about dealing with leaders that are going through hard times, what, if obviously divorce, death, there's lots of things that can go on in your personal life that makes you, at that moment at least, not a great effective leader. Are there certain things to have in place where you can kind of avoid the downfall from just the chaos that happens in life?
Yeah. I call them check engine lights. Because I notice in my own internal, and I think actually, Jeff, you're the one who referred to this as far as, kind of things just feel like they're going way out of control, right? So there's certain things in my life that I put in place that are my check engine lights. And I know that my energy is draining in that area because either I'm emotionally attached to it and I'm just dragging down, and it's just so hard for me to handle. And Angela, you even said the same thing. Now that we're kind of going through a lot of the circumstances, society is putting all of these restrictions. I mean, it's weighing on us, right? That weight, that drain has impact in the way that I act and the way that I do and how things come out. So my check engine lights are, number one, well, maybe I should go back, because the way I found my check engine lights were, I was completely drained and about ready to break. And my breaking point was when I came back home after I had gone through the winter, our fourth quarter as e-com, fourth quarter, busiest time of the year for anybody that's in e-com selling products. It's the busiest thing. It's the most stressful. Then you add holidays, family obligations on top of that. All these things are going on. We took a trip to my parents in Pennsylvania. They had a backed up drain. We had 3 inches of water in the basements. I didn't sleep at all. Then we took a 12-hour trip back into Michigan. I was drained physically, emotionally, mentally. I was at zero on all of my tanks. Driving into the driveway, our garage door falls and breaks, and I cannot get our garage door open. And that was my breaking point. And I started going all MMA on the garage door, just beating it, throwing the fists and elbows and kicking it. And in the back of my mind, I mean, like the only thing I could think of was I have got to get through this door. Meanwhile, my wife, my 3 kids are all sitting in the van behind me like, who is this monster? I have never seen this guy ever. It was because I was broken. I was at that point of being at completely zero, and I couldn't think. I couldn't comprehend. I couldn't think creatively. I couldn't come up with other solutions. It was just, I've got to get through this door. No matter how unrealistic it was, I have got to get through this door. And that was my point in time. I was like, okay, Jeff, we talked about, I got disgusted because I don't ever want to be in this position again. I don't want to be like this in front of my parents or in front of my wife or in front of my kids and them looking up to me as a dad. I don't want to be in this position ever again. So I was disgusted, which led me on the journey to be able to say, what are my check engine lights? And so when I found my check engine lights, I'm looking at this and saying, okay, when I start to get impatient with my kids, I start to snap at my wife, I start to become completely frustrated with whatever I'm doing in business, I cannot think creatively of a solution. Those are all signs, my check engine lights, that I am reaching that breaking point. And I've got to come back to what we just talked about earlier. I've got to find my center. I've got to start either going on a hike on a mountain trail. I've got to spend time with my kids. I've got to go on a date with my wife. I've got to come back to my center.
Tim, I'm surprised that's the first time you have ever melted down like that. Have you never taken the family to Disney World?
Well, I have a lot of stamina, maybe. I don't know. But there was a lot of other things that were going on in the background that I mean, dude, we would be here for hours trying to tell the entire story. But that was the first time that I really broke down. And maybe it wasn't probably the first time I broke down. It was the first time that I realized that, and it made lots of circumstances, but my kids were old enough to understand what was going on. And I think that's what really left that impression on me, is the fact I turned around and that little alarm going on in the back of the head, and you turn around, you see your kids and like their mouths are dropped, like, who is this guy? And I think that's what left the impact. It was like, it would just hit you hard.
We've all
Tim, do you read J. Parker Palmer?
What's the name of the book? Maybe.
He has a series of books. He writes on servant leadership. And
yeah, I've read a lot. Is he the one that wrote The Servant? Is that the individual?
Now you're going to make me Google.
So there's a really awesome book on servant leadership that I love. It's called The Servant, and I don't remember the name of the author.
Are you sure that's not Greenleaf?
No, Robert Greenleaf is he wrote Servant Leadership. He was the guy from AT&T, and it's considered the father of servant leadership. But
exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I think Jesus was the first servant leader, flat out.
I mean, that's
2,000 years ago. There's so much stuff that he did that was so powerful. Anyway, so that's just, I'm like, Robert Greenleaf is not really the father of servant leadership. I think Jesus is, but that's just me.
I mean, so Parker's really bigger one is called The Hidden Wholeness. And he also, so he's sort of like, I don't know, let's say Greenleaf disciple, right?
Okay.
But one of the check lights, to use your analogy, that he often had was his wife. And he said if he ever kind of got a little bit snarky, she's like, might be time to go on a retreat. Yep. And it was telling to me, because he writes all these, peaceful and wholesome and everything. And then his wife's like, time for you to take a break. And so clearly they had their strong communication. So sometimes that check engine light doesn't have to be yourself. You can
100%.
Work with all the people around you and let them say, hey, some feedback sometimes is a good thing, right? Like, you're getting tired here, you're hangry, someone walks in and hands you a bottle of water in the middle of a meeting, might be a little bit of an indicator that you need to calm it down for a second, right? Like
100%.
having that support structure is also really important, I think. And in his case, he used his wife, but I'm grateful that I have some people that'll be pointing things out to me as well. I get animated, and a little bit of water doesn't hurt to like calm things down and maybe take a breath for a second.
Yep.
I think that's good. That's a good point. Being able to have that, structure to be able to say, all right, take a retreat, take a break, take a drink of water, whatever. I'm
Go
going
for
to
a
jump
hike.
here to comments. Yeah, exactly. Mick said, hey, everybody, Mick Manhattan has a great
Hey,
podcast.
Mick.
Tamala said hi. And then she also said, she's been teaching mental and emotional discipline for years. Discipline helps with discernment too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Angela, to your point, and I love that you did that, and I love that aspect of it, and I couldn't agree more. In fact, I've given my wife permission for that. As a man, I struggle with the vulnerability of that, because I'm, according to society, I'm not allowed to be considered weak. I'm not allowed to be able to show some of those pieces, right? That's what society tells us that we can't do. And so I would say, even if you take that one step further, I completely agree. You need to have people that you can trust, but you have to be vulnerable and show your scars. Because at the end of the day, we always get attacked where our greatest strengths are at. And if we're getting cut and attacked where our strengths are, that's where our scars are. And I can't tell you how many times I've been told to go ahead and cover that scar. And if I cover the scar, then I cover my greatest strength. So we have to be vulnerable and show that there are times when we break down. There are times when we need help. There are times when we get animated. Please reach in and give me a bottle of water, because you have to be able to be vulnerable to use those experiences to lead as a mentor. Otherwise, you don't have as much of an influence. You don't have as much of an impact.
Right. I agree.
absolutely.
It's hard for
So,
me, though.
well, I think it's hard for a lot of people. I think it's hard for a lot of people. And I mean, I've never been a guy before, so I can't say from a guy standpoint, but it can be hard even from a female standpoint to be vulnerable. You especially, for me, being, especially when I worked for other people, being out in the corporate world, I had to be, tough, because you didn't want, if you showed any emotion, then you got a whole lot of, well, of course, there goes a woman, being all emotional again. So a lot of times you would have to watch, or I would have to watch what I would say, or if I was too firm, then I was called the big B, so it's still like, it ends up being this kind of like back and forth, or that's been my experience of it. But I do want to talk about, I know when we were texting, you mentioned, I was trying to find our text, but I can't find it, but you mentioned, oh, there it is, about passing the mantle of leadership. Like, what? So, I mean, I know this, we don't have a whole lot of time, but if you could kind of like brush over maybe some of that.
Yeah, totally. So, I actually, there's a mantle of leadership that was presented to us, and the outline was absolutely incredible. And that was when King David passed his mantle of leadership to King Solomon. And it was written out, and it was such a credible story. And it was such a credible way. It's in Chronicles, it's Second Chronicle. Anyway, I'll give you the reference if you want to look it up. But it's an incredible passing of a mantle of a leadership from King David into King Solomon. And some of the key elements that he did. Number one is that he did it in public. He did it in front of all of the other leaders of the land. And I think that's really an important component, especially as we look at our businesses, is that sometimes we never physically pass that mantle. We never come in front and say, this is the guy that is going to be leading you. So there's a lot of confusion in those that are considered the secondary leaders or managers in a company. We never actually pass that mantle. So it has to be, number one, it has to be public. The second thing that he did is he actually created a plan. He created an outline, because Solomon's greatest accomplishment was building the temple, which was a feat that was an incredible thing, and people came from all over the world just to see the temple. But David laid out the plan, and he got supplies together, and he did all kinds of things, and then he took all of those plans and said, this is what we have planned, handed it to Solomon. But the key element is he then let go of it, because he said, here's the plan, here's what you're going to be able to do. But then he didn't micromanage it. He didn't say, well, this is what you have to do first and second and third. He just said, here's the plan. This is our vision. This is our structure. Go ahead and run with that plan. And Solomon took over it. The third thing that he did, too, is he encouraged him and set him up for, look, this is going to be hard. This is going to be tough. So don't be afraid. Go ahead and just do the work. And he encouraged him and just kind of gave him that charge. And I think that's so important, something that we miss. And whether you're passing the mantle from a father to a son, or from one business owner to another, you've got to charge him and say, look, you can do this. I believe in you. We've taught you. You've got all of the skills necessary. And then the fourth thing that he did, he just said, look, here's all of my experiences. And if you follow David's life at all, you can look back through, and he killed a bear, he killed a lion, he killed Goliath. He did all of these incredible, fantastic things. And he said, this is what I was able to accomplish. These are the experiences that I've had. You can have those same things because you have the same God inside of you. You have the same experience, the same talents. You have the same thing inside of you. So you can be able to do this. So passing the mantle of leadership doesn't have to be hard. We just follow that pattern, follow that path, and we can be able to pass a mantle of leadership from a father to a son. We can pass it from one business owner to the next business owner. This works in every aspect. But if you just follow those 4 steps, it gives you the power to be able to say, okay, here's how we can successfully pass a business off to the next leader. There's so much more to that, but I was just trying to do a flyby.
No. I think that's a good outline overview of being able to pass it over. And I think it's important to realize, I mean, and it's hard to think about handing over something you've built with your own hands to somebody else to run. Even the times I've had to hire in help, I go through the same thing every time when I end up delegating something new that I've never delegated before. I go through the same bargaining with myself. I can totally do it. I'll just make more time over here, schedule it over here, because I'm so terrified of the what ifs once I hand it over. But thankfully, every single time that has happened, I've handed it over and I sat back and kind of waited for it all to fall to pieces. But if you're bringing in the right people, that's not what happens. And actually, most of the time I've looked at it and gone, oh, wow, that's better than I was doing. I ends up being such a good thing. But you do have that feeling at first of, and it's every single time. You think I would be good at it by now, but I'm not. I get that same punch in the gut every single time I get ready to delegate something new.
Yeah, and practically speaking, the way you pass the mantle of leadership, I know we're talking kind of really high level, but if we break it down and come into the implemental stages, whether you have a VA or you hire an employee, this process still is the same. You publicly say, this is the guy, this is the person, this is who is going to be in charge of this component. Here's the plan that we're going to follow. I believe in them, giving them the support. And then saying, hey, here's all of the experiences that we have as a company. You can learn from these. We're going to help you through this. And you just continue to pass that on. And that's how you grow your company to the level of being able to delegate properly and then dish off what you need to dish off.
We were talking about this morning, and we kind of put it into the buckets of delegation requires training. It requires time, trust, and support. Right. And then actually kind of even a little bit of testing, right, to make sure that the system is working correctly. But you can't just delegate. You can't just say, hey, go do it. Yeah. They need to be able to do it. So we were in this topic because we were talking about the topic of empowerment, but really delegation and empowerment are quite similar if you're doing your job correctly, right? If you haven't trained them and you just hand them the task, you've done nobody any favors.
Correct.
They need support depending on the complexity of the task. Sometimes you need some time and some testing. Learning is an iterative process. And I think it's difficult when we get into business and our resources are very tight. I want to tell you once and expect you to do it, but that's not how I learned, right? So I come back to all the time, how long did it take you to convince your kid to tie his shoes? First, we had to learn how to tie the shoe. Then we actually had to say, tie the shoe. Now that you know how, are you actually going to do it? And it took years of iterations, right, to get your kid to tie the shoes.
Yep.
So we talk about the what, the how, and the why. When you talk about training, the what, okay, a kid can tie his shoe by the time he's probably 5, and in average, right? But I'm telling you, my kid's 13, and I'm still saying, Aiden, tie your shoes.
I have an 18-year-old. I still tell them to tie shoes.
Exactly.
My kids just start wearing Crocs. They gave up on life, I guess. They just start wearing Crocs. It's just whatever.
Bring back the 80s with the Velcro strips.
You're muted again, Jeff.
Yeah,
so your quirkiness was lost upon us.
Oh, no. So But I mean, I think it really matters. Like we talk about these different elements, that training doesn't happen overnight. Delegation doesn't happen successfully overnight.
Correct.
And so if you're you have to put time on your calendar to truly do a good job
Absolutely.
to delegate.
Yeah.
And that comes from where I look, like I said, the leader of leaders is part of coaching, and a coach walks with those individuals. So they're there during practice, they're there during the game day, they're there during the after time, through the failures, through the successes, through all of that. Being a leader of leaders is truly walking with them on a day-by-day basis, which is what a coach does. And 100% agree with that. It's just, you've got to be able to train, work with, and develop a long-term relationship.
Yes. And I think that's what mentoring is, not the sage on the mountain, personally. Like the mentor is the one who's willing to walk with you a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And look out for you also. Like when you're not in the room, someone has to speak for you.
Yep. Yeah. And that's why I love hate our English language, because like I said, I use one word and I'm like, oh, so
yeah,
it's all
I
good.
think it makes it interesting.
Yeah. Oh, true. Very, very true. Very true. So let me leave this, and maybe we'll end on this, but the 5 powers of influence, and I'll just kind of touch on this real quick, but number 1, it's reward, punishment, position, woo, which is winning others over, or charisma. And then the last one is your experience. So the way that you influence, the way that you have the ability to influence others is through those 5: reward, punishment, position, woo, and experience. And the interesting thing about experience is sometimes those that have the most influence as a leader are not the CEOs in the head office. Oftentimes they're the guy that's been on the ground floor doing the same job for 30 or 35, 40 years that may have more influence on that company than any of the CEOs that have come in play. So influence is something that you can develop. You can continue to build that. And again, it needs to be influence, not manipulation, because manipulation is wrong. You don't manipulate people. But you have to use those, and understanding that power of influence is really there for the benefit of others.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Good stuff. Angela, you have any more questions for Tim?
I don't. Tim, thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Absolutely.
We should probably keep going.
Absolutely.
I'd say you all could talk all day long about this. So
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we're out of time, so it's not right now. But Jeff, do you have anything else you want to say?
I don't. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Jeff.
Excellent. Yeah, and thanks as usual, Tim. That's been great. And go ahead and give everybody where they can follow you, find you, all that.
The easiest thing is flow.page/my name. So flow, FLOW.PAGE /Tim Croll, TIMCROLL. And if you wanted to join the newsletter, you just click on the very top one. It's my website. You can get in and register for a newsletter. And then there's other ways to follow me on social media, but that's the one link, flow.page /Tim Croll.
There you go. Super easy, to the point. So it's been great. And Angela, Jeff, thanks as usual. Ray, if you're watching this later, we missed you. And until next week, we will be live again next Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks, everybody.
Yep.
Was we going to try to do the fist bump thing? Because I already forgot.
Otherwise, Maria.
Wrong leg. Gosh.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm never going to get this, ever.
See?
Never going to. Never.
Jeff, I got your head down there.
Hold on, Tim.
I got the high 5 for Tim. Yeah, you almost got it.
I'm just going to hold still. You find me. I give up. It's good. All right.
We'll see you guys.
Bye.
See you guys. Thanks.